Today we're looking at a 2008 Ford Mustang base model. We are having a leaking brake caliper. It's leaking brake fluid. And we know this particular wheel is leaking brake fluid because if we look on the inside of the wheel, it's hard to see in the video, but this entire part of the inside of the rim here is coated with brake fluid. So we know that this wheel caliper is leaking. So we have two options. We can either rebuild it or replace it. Rebuilding it, I'm gonna rebuild it because the repair kit or rebuild kit was only $6-7 versus a new caliper, which is running about $60 or $70. And I got the rebuild kit here, and a heck of a time finding the part number. So there's the part number for this 2008 Ford Mustang base model. It's the 41247, and it basically comes with looks like 3 seals, 4 seals, 2 snap rings, and the dust boot for the caliper right here. So we're going to rebuild this caliper because the caliper itself, I mean, it's a little rusted, but there's nothing physically wrong with it. So it's just the seals leaking. So save some money and just to replace all the seals. So we're going to take this apart. And obviously the first thing you have to do is jack up the car and take the wheel off, which we already did. And the next thing you want to do is take the unbolt the caliper. And you do that by unbolting this one here, unscrewing that bolt, and unscrewing this bolt right here. I believe those are 13mm. Okay, and those were 13mm bolts. And then once you take those bolts out, you can probably wiggle the caliper loose. But if you're still having trouble, there are 2 more bolts you can take off, which takes this whole bracket off. And they are back right here. That's a 15mm. And the one on the bottom side right there, it's also a 15mm. And that will just take this whole bracket off, and you just take it off as one piece and then get the caliper off easier. Okay, now that we got the caliper off, we can just go ahead and set our bracket here and our brake pads aside. I went ahead and took the rotor off too, just to have more room. Don't let your brake caliper hang by the brake line here, because it could break that in some way, because the caliper is actually pretty heavy. And we can see that it's, if I get it in there, there we go, that's for sure leaking because we see brake fluid there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the parking brake here, and there was a bracket here that took off already, so you have to take that off and then just use a screwdriver and pry this part off. It's just sitting in there, so you just pry that and that'll pop right off. Okay, now we got the parking brake off. We're going to get this spring detached. Now I haven't disconnected the brake line yet, because as soon as we do, we're going to start losing brake fluid at a pretty fast rate. So I'm doing everything I can before taking this brake line off, so we save as much brake fluid as possible and reduce the risk of getting air into the brake line, especially if you run out of brake fluid at the reservoir by the master cylinder. Then you're really screwed. But yeah, so we're going to take this spring off here, and it's through this part, so we're gonna have to pry this off this little hook thing and get that spring off. Okay, and that was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. I thought there would be more tension on that spring, but if I can get to focus here, it's still not focusing. But then once that's popped off, obviously you just pull the spring through the hole there, and you can take off the spring. And then next we're going to take off that bolt. Actually, it was a nut that was on top right there where the socket is, and that is a, let's see, that is a, I'm gonna say 13. Yes, it is a 13 millimeter. And just go ahead and take that off. And actually I went ahead and bolted the caliper and the bracket back to the car without the brake pads or anything on it, just so I get the torque on that nut to break that nut off. So I got the nut off, and the piece that was over top of it, like this, is splined. And I just worked that. I stuck a screwdriver, actually, this is backwards, like that. It's I stuck a screwdriver between, in that little gap there and a little gap up here, and just worked this piece off very slowly because it's splined. The next thing you're gonna do is this bolt right here. It's a Torx head screw. See, I'm losing a lot of brake fluid now. Go ahead and unscrew that. And again, that was also really tight, so I'm glad I put it back on the car so I could get the torque on that I needed. And then this piece with the screw will just come off. So we set that aside. And now we can see the seal right here. We'll replace that. So we're pretty much down to the point that we're going to have to take the brake line off. So we'll go ahead and do that next. Alright, so we just disconnected the brake line. Of course, we got a bunch of brake fluid coming out, but that's alright. So the next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take the piston out. And there's two ways you can do this. You can do this the easy way or the hard way. I am going to have to do it the hard way because I don't have any other option. But the easy way I've seen online is you put air pressure from an air compressor into there, and it will push the piston out to the point that you can wiggle it out. The hard way, which I'm going to have to do, is I'm going to have to get a flathead screwdriver and gently put it in behind the little groove there and slowly walk this thing out. Okay, and in the process of getting the piston out here, the dust boot came off. So I had to be very careful not to nick this part of the piston with the screwdriver, because this is the part that the seal rides on, and if you damage that, then you're pretty much just going to have to buy a whole new caliper, because yeah, it'll leak when it hits that part that you nicked. So luckily I got it off pretty well. And if you look inside, there's a little screw in there inside this part right here, so you have to look out for that. And there's a seal we're going to replace in there. If you look really far down in there, there's a snap ring. We're going to have to take that out to replace the seal on the other side. Let's see if I can get a better picture of it. And actually my snap ring pliers were not long enough to get down in there, so I was able to get some needle nose pliers, some small needle nose pliers to get the snap ring out of there. And then once that's out, you can just wiggle this thing loose and it just comes out like that. Remember, there's a seal there. We're going to go ahead and replace that seal since we already have it apart. And then obviously we're going to replace that seal too, and the seal for the piston seal right here. And this is very minor, but I thought I'd let you guys know. But I thought I could just pull the seal out with the needle nose pliers that I used, and actually it was really stuck in there, so I had to stick a screwdriver down in there and pry this out. So obviously I ripped it. You can see I ripped it, but it just comes out of one piece. There's nothing holding that in besides the pressure of the seal itself, so that just pops right out. Now switching back over to the piston, there's another snap ring down inside there. It was in there, and actually I was able to get my snap ring pliers in there and get that, because the holes on this snap ring are smaller than the other one, so I wasn't able to get my needle nose pliers in there to get in those holes and squeeze it. But we got the snap ring pliers in there and got this off. So we go ahead and pull this part out of the piston, and we'll find another seal towards the end there, and we'll go ahead and replace that. Again, this seal is probably not bad, but since we're in here anyway, we'll just go ahead and replace it. And this seal right here is a little bit different. It's tapered, so I want to show you guys how it came out. The tapered end was towards the tapered end of the thing right there. Wish this thing was defocused. There we go. So that's how it came out. And I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but there was a lot of grease around these holes up here, so we're gonna have to get some grease and re-grease those up. So that's how it came out. So that's how we'll put the new one in. And this is another like FYI, just in case these came off. That's how they were when they were on there before they came off. So if they fell off, that's the order that they were in. So you can put them back in the correct order. And then pretty much you just reassemble in the reverse order. But like I said at the beginning, there's nothing physically wrong. I'm going to clean that out obviously, but there's nothing physically wrong with the caliper or any of the components inside the caliper itself. So there's no point in spending $60 or $70 on a new caliper when it was just a seal leaking, and the seal kit, the rebuild kit, only cost $7. And this actually was not that hard to do. I would say probably the hardest part was getting that snap ring out of there and getting the nut and the screw off this thing. And that was it. And of course we'll put it all back together in the reverse order. Put all the seals back on, the dust boot thing, and all the snap rings. And then we'll have to bleed it, of course, but there are plenty of videos online to show you how to bleed your brakes, so I'm not going to show you how to do that. But that's pretty much it. And then once I get this all back together, I'll show you how it looks. Pretty much it's going to look like the same as the beginning, just with the new dust cover, new seals, but that's it. And then just another FYI for you, when you're putting this back into the caliper, you have to rotate it until it seats. You can't just stick it in there, because you won't be able to get the snap ring back in there with it in the wrong position. So basically you just rotate it and push down until it doesn't really snap, but it just seats so it doesn't turn anymore, because you won't be able to get that snap ring in there with it not seated correctly. Okay, got everything back together, and we went ahead and bled them, or bled this brake I guess, and everything seems to be working fine. I'm gonna go take it for a test drive and then see if we have any leaks. We don't have any leaks when we bled them, but I just want to make sure that this doesn't leak anymore, because we are coming into winter time and there's no fun working outside on your car in the dead of winter. So I want to make sure this is fixed before winter sets in. Alright, thanks for watching.